The game I'd like to tell you about is called
Monster Hunter Rise.
First things first, 0 ads. The gameplay is not just fun, it's got that perfect level of challenge that keeps you hooked.
First things first, 0 ads. That's a selling point. Where are we at the moment with video games? I am Couch Cooper, and this is an in-depth look at Monster Hunter Rise in 2024. On the PlayStation 5, that's important because it performs incredibly. We've got 60 frames per second and a beautifully solid 4K. And on the subject of the PlayStation 5, Helldivers 2 is absolutely smashing the industry and causing a load of uproar. We've also seen a number of bigger name YouTubers take it on and put out some great content about it. Video Game Donkey, less than 24 hours, put out a video, 1.7 million views, and look at that title, look at the innovation and sort of grabby look to it all. And this is not just a bunch of mates having banter and no real structure. This is a really in-depth look at an incredible, almost perfect sequel. His relationship with the original game on a local co-op front, fascinating stuff.
Inky Pinky Funky, Daddy bought the donkey, donkey dies, Daddy cries, Inky Pinky Funky.
Whoa, this game is good. If you ever get hurt, dive to heal.
Let's stick to Rise for the minute, and as you can see, I'm completely obsessed with the complete armor set and the introduction of the Palamute, and being able to have a 2-set system for your companion also just doubles that meta for me. I love matching it all up, and the buffs and resistance against each armor is fascinating. All depends on which monster you slaughter to receive either an elemental resistance or an attack buff. That's always been in the Monster Hunter series, but it just seems to really hit home with this. I love that idea. If Rise had a decent photo mode like World, I'd be able to come up with stuff like this. Tiddles, unfortunately, is completely out of fash in this particular capture. So just to hit that home, you've got your Palamute, your Palico, you, and your weapon that can all mix and match, or all line up. The latter is kind of my favourite area. I wanted to touch on those monster introduction cutscenes. They're absolutely amazing. I love the traditional sound, and it really gets you in the mood to take on a lot of these monsters. I want to talk about the music full stop as well, because I've been playing a few recent games, Suicide Squad, a lot of Western studios do not take their soundtracks orchestrally as seriously as the Monster Hunter series does. It's impeccable. Frickin' Gunlance is impeccable, FYI. Really awesome seeing some of the original monsters reworked and introduced in this incredibly cool fashion. The soundtrack to Rise is also unique amongst its predecessors. It's a very recognizable theme. I love all the aesthetic at the entrance of the game, and some people it doesn't sit too well with, but for me, all of it is flawless. To say Monster Hunter Rise completely envelops you as a video game and as a feeling is a massive understatement, and I walk into it and just let it all flow over. I am so into everything that this game has to offer, and that Dango tune, that's as catchy as hell. Veterans will notice the obvious mistake here. I'm using essentially a blast fire weapon against a monster that's resistant to it. Small things like that mean that you won't always be able to line up your weapon with your armor, but I want to address the reworked mounting system. You actually have full control of the monster. This is not a sort of stay on challenge. You can ride it around, use a lot of its quick and slow attacks, and that is there because if you have another monster in an arena, you can then fight the two against each other. So it's a little bit like the turf war thing, but with loads more depth, and every monster has its characteristic. Another layer of meta has been added with the mount mechanic and what monster you get hold of or tempt into the battle area and cause all sorts of damage and mayhem to the monster you're fighting or want murdered for that mission. This section of footage is actually super important. This monster is unique to Rise, but this also applies to a lot of legacy monsters and the change up with their attack patterns and moves. Rise introduces a traversal air mechanic called the bug wire, which we'll look at in a second, but it implements these amazing scenic changes with the attack patterns on the monsters that force you to incorporate those moves, and it's an incredible addition, and it adds a huge layer of depth when it comes to fighting these new monsters and seeing what they're going to do to you. On the subject of Monster Hunter World, I put a video out about the differences in these two games. I'll annotate and link it, so I don't really need to go into the nuances that make the two very different action role-playing games. Still under the hood of the franchise, but for me it's kind of preference, what you prefer. One's a graphical mammoth, the other one's a high-octane, extremely playable sequel. So the jury's out on that, and it really is the gamer's choice. And talking of gamers, one of my few pleasures in life is watching people enjoy and discover a decent video game, particularly on this platform. You've got to go and check out my boy Josh. He is learning all kinds of cool stuff about both games. Full channel link in description. Totally recommended. Swing by and say hi. Let's talk about wirebug and weapon integration. So the next layer of meta, inclusive of that traversal mechanic, is adding wirebug skills to the weapons themselves. It becomes particularly handy with the range and some of the more stagnant, larger, heavy-hitting weapons. It gives you maneuverability. It's an amazing angle to really spice up that gameplay. For me, one of the major differences between these two games are what happens to you when you take a hit. On Monster Hunter World, you will lie on your back and lay there for an unprecedented amount of time, dependent on what you've been hit by. With Rise, if you manage your bugs correctly, you can use them as a get out of jail card and whip away at the last second, or even straight over the monster, past him, in for another attack. It gives you a second life almost, and another angle to deliver more punishment. All of it, sometimes, for anyone who's new to the series, may become a little bit overwhelming, and some of the weapons, including the insect glaive, is so maneuverable. The integrating, I've had one sip of beer, I've turned into a Suffolk farmer. Integrating those mechanics can just be way too much. I adore that insect glaive, but I am struggling to blend in that wirebug alongside already ridiculously maneuverable gameplay. Check this out. There's also two things that really grew on me that's kind of unique to this game, and that is the Rampage section, which is really an arena where you've got turrets, a bit like a tower defense system where the monsters have got to traverse through an obstacle course that you've constructed yourself. It's actually quite satisfying. I did not like the idea of the maps being taken away, but after having this game for over a year, they feel totally in place with what the game's message is about. That brings me over to the campaign. The single player content is also very, very strong. That brings me over to its online 4-player multiplayer credentials. I love them as much as I do the single player content. You can't say that about a lot of video games. Now, the people I had to persuade to come on to Helldivers, who I play this game with, I said that Helldivers is potentially on a par with Monster Hunter Rise, which was met with a stunned silence from a few of my peers. However, I feel that Helldivers roadmap and that extra race, and once they get on top of the server issues, there's not going to be much holding Helldivers 2 back. If there's 4 of you and you're all into that Helldivers 2 model, this is a perfect alternative. And if the servers do go down more, and if you've got some time to really inject into an excellent action role-playing game, Monster Hunter Rise is really your next best step. After that video trailer of Monster Hunter Wilds, the spiritual sequel to Worlds, and after the Helldivers Always Online pay-to-play PSN issue, I'm 100% convinced that that game will involve always being online, and we may not see some totally offline content. That's a long shot, and I know that prediction is a bit pessimistic, and you can still play Helldivers 2 single player. Good luck with that on challenging. But I think being able to access a game when you haven't got the internet is a very precious thing, and it's becoming more and more difficult to do, particularly with brand new AAA or AA games. I don't think Capcom would do that to us, but the very construction of Wilds, a little bit like Helldivers 2 with its metamorphosizing Galaxy War, may be integral to that game model. What are your thoughts on Rise? Do you prefer it over World? Have you not played World and have got into Rise? I would recommend going to World. Also, they perfectly kind of complement each other. Will Helldivers 2 be my new go-to 4-player online game? Well, up until my PSN runs out. But as mentioned in my previous videos, I'm willing to trade that in because that game is so incredible. And as Gaming Donkey mentioned, it really is head and shoulders above everything else that's come out this year within that genre. I would also pitch Remnant from the Ashes 2 as a third option, as an incredible online co-op. Soulsborne with guns, that has also been reviewed extensively by myself. I will put links in. A massive thank you if you got to this point in the video. You're over 13 minutes. I owe you a beer, and I will, of course, see you down there in the comments of the Helldivers 2 video by Video Game Donkey.
「振りがたし花とはの